Today I'm going to talk about how does one achieve marketable innovation. People use the innovation word an awful lot. They don't really talk a lot about how does one achieve innovation. One that is marketable, one that results in real sales. Innovation that's just different for different sake is really not good enough. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that can be achieved through a systematic process. And I'm calling it a UX to design mapping strategy. So in the past, people would say, okay, how do we achieve innovation? Well, it's a tribal knowledge of a few knowledgeable veterans. It's the voice of the customer from opinion leaders. It might be a shotgun approach to throwing out a bunch of ideas and hoping something sticks. And perhaps many, many iterations of design concepts through some sort of a long-winded process. Well, everything is about time to market these days, and quite frankly, there has to be a better way to understand what is truly innovative in your industry. So this is what I'm going to be talking about, is how does one achieve this? And it is about usability. I know several companies have talked about usability already today, and there's going to be more talks about usability later today. So I'm talking about usability, but I'm going to apply it to design and how to design using a user-centric process. So I'm going to talk about qualitative research. I'm going to talk about synthesizing real user needs. I'm going to talk about using the output from that qualitative research to baseline your traditional quantitative marketing analysis, and using all of that together to build a robust set of design inputs. This mapping strategy goes one step further. It basically says, okay, we understand what our inputs are going to be, but wouldn't it be great if we can monitor the way the design evolves through its early stages, through its concept stages and so forth, and be able to quantify the importance of various parts of the design to make sure that you are capturing the essential elements of a successful design and not just innovating for the sake of innovation. And then ultimately, this process helps you when you do your user validations down the road. And if you don't know how to do that effectively, it's a bit of a crapshoot, right? You can get to validation and you can fail. And if the FDA fails you, you're almost back to square one. You have to rethink what's happening. And more times than not, what people do is they band-aid the problem by training, by updating their IFUs. They do things in a different way to make the product fit. Well, if you can design it successfully from the get-go, you don't have to rely so heavily on training and IFUs. So moving on, I only have 20 minutes. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to talk about contextual inquiry and what that means. I'm going to talk about UX mapping. I'm going to talk about brainstorming, developing the marketing requirements, understanding what use risk assessment means, and then talking about the conceptual design process that uses all of those inputs. So I created a sort of a generic roadmap in terms of how to design a medical device. What you see in the bottom row is what sales and marketing, voice of the customer, inputs, and functions are along the process of developing a device. The middle row is the actual design of that device. And the top row is how usability engineering becomes an integrated part of the process. They're all integrated with each other, and they are a concurrent process that runs from early product definition all the way through to V&V and product rollout. Some of you may have seen something like this. You may not have seen all of it. Some of you understand what formative testing means, what summative testing means, and so forth. But it's highly integrated, and you really need to be doing all three of these things to have the best chance of success. So I'm going to use a fictitious project that I put together in the last 6 months. We have this product. It's a design study over at our booth, and booth 515. You're welcome to come over and check it out, and we'll explain to you why we did what we did and how we've used 30 years of product design experience to come up with a console device handpiece example that seems to make some sense. So we've decided to call this thing some kind of an electrosurgical console system, and I'm going to use this example, and we made up the MRD, we made up the specifications and some of the usability feedback just to give you an example of what we're talking about. So in this case, like I said, we're trying to develop a best-in-class ESS design. We're trying to develop exceptional handpiece designs. We're trying to maximize ease of use. We're trying to reduce use safety. and all of those great things. So this is contextual inquiry. What it is some people call it immersive user research. This is where you actually go out. Before you actually start designing anything, you go out, you see how people are using devices today. You know, what are the legacy devices, what's working, what's not working, what makes the good stuff work well, and what makes the bad stuff work badly. This is all part of upfront understanding what the user needs are. What's working well for the user, what's failing them. But this is all great, because everybody talks about voice of the customer, and it's great to hear the feedback from the customer. In many cases, the customer has a pretty good idea of what they want, and they're willing to tell everybody that. And that's great. So you can design to the voice of the customer, but that's not going to give you unique innovation. How do you get unique innovation? You have to listen to them, you have to observe them, you have to understand what they're saying, and you have to interpret what they're saying. Innovation you get from understanding unmet user needs. It's what they don't tell you. It's what they are doing workarounds, and they think that they're solving the problem because they're doing workarounds. Well, you don't want to do a workaround. You want your device to take care of their needs without having a Band-Aid. So it's interpretive. It's it requires a lot of skill in understanding the clinician's mind, understanding what works for them, understanding what doesn't work for them, and so forth. So there's a lot of listening and a lot of observing and a lot of interpretation. So these are just some examples of what you might get from contextual inquiry when you're in the OR, when you're in the cath lab, when you're in the doctor's office, wherever people are using the device that you're about to design. So once you collect all this information, you put together something that we call some sort of a UX map. Okay? It can be a workflow map, it can be a procedural map. The map really is up to what is it you're trying to uncover. In most cases, it's the procedure map. It basically outlines all the steps of the procedure from the time they touch your device to the time they throw it away or stop using it. So this is, again, a made-up procedure map that kind of defines what this electrosurgical device might be. And this is an example of one area. You can see when I circle this, you see the unhappy face. That's an emotional metric. And we measure the emotional metric in one of many ways, but you understand where the end user is not very happy with that particular step. He might be unhappy because it's taken too long. He might be unhappy because it's difficult to do. He might be unhappy because, who knows, there isn't a device that's doing the job properly, so he has to make up his own device. He's got to do a workaround. He's got to do various things. So when you see an unhappy emotional feedback like this, it gives you a chance to do a deep dive here, right, and say, okay, why are so many people unhappy with this particular step? Is there something I can do from a design standpoint that can make them happy? And this is part of the interpretation. So we take the feedback from all of this study of the end users, and we digest it, we spit it back out, and ideally, what we do is we put together some kind of a structured brainstorming session. And it's important that you do this in the right way. It's not about throwing a bunch of ideas on the table and hoping you come up with some kind of an amazing idea that's going to create IP and all kinds of stuff. You've got to have the right people in this event. You've got to have the right way of generating the ideas. But just as important as it is to generate great ideas, is just as important to be able to filter those ideas out and to pair off the stuff that's too risky, takes too long, not part of your portfolio, not what you're trying to do, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you have a convergence that allows you to create a small pipeline of ideas that can be acted upon. These might be short-term, mid-term, long-term approaches. There might be low-risk, mid-risk, high-risk ideas. Again, it's up to your company to decide what you want to come out of this. But at the end of this synthesis, there should be a small number of great ideas or directions or technologies that you and your team can go after to achieve. So once this is all done, this is all part of putting together really robust design inputs. So the marketing team usually takes the first cut at that. It's based mostly on a quantitative approach to understanding market needs, requirements, price points, volumes, ROI, all those great things. But once you have that, you really got to understand that you got to sort of put quantitative and qualitative stuff together to create really tangible user inputs. And from that, you can start your process. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the usability engineering process, this is the new sort of tagline. It's this use risk assessment. They used to call it UFMEAs, various things, but basically it's an umbrella terminology, URA, that runs throughout the entire design development cycle, and it's really meant to make sure that you uphold use safety at all times. So this is an example of what used to be called a UFMEA in the way that we do it. And you can outline certain areas that say, okay, we've got some areas here that we need to solve some problems. In this case, we made up the contents here, but in this case, an example would be, it takes too long to change out the instruments during surgery. Wouldn't it be great if we could find a device or a console or a system that doesn't require all of this change out all the time? Can't we just have one sort of universal device that can just, you push a button and you're on to the next function, right? And that saves a lot of time. And we know that time is money in the OR. It's $100 a minute sometimes. So if you can save a few minutes here and save a few minutes there, you're going to make your end user happier, and you're going to make the procedure cheaper as well. So an idea of the output of something like that would be developing something that would satisfy the ability to change out these systems without having to literally open up new instruments. So this case study really is going to look at a bunch of different things. We're in the design conceptual process now, so we're looking to see how we can manage a lot of things to create the innovation. As a design team, we often go about the design process by looking at configuration. How might we put all of the components and pieces of this device together in a way that's most meaningful? It's not a bunch of engineers going off to their labs and saying, okay, the power supply should go here, the user interface should go there, and this should go there because it makes sense from a technical standpoint. What if the end user wants it configured differently? Shouldn't we know that up front so that the engineers can do a better job at packaging this thing? So we look at the configuration standpoint early on so that the outside-in needs are just as useful as the inside-out needs. We can't just think about this project from the inside out. We're also looking to prioritize feature sets from the input requirements, from the user needs, and so forth. So we're going to put a bunch of ideas together, and we're going to sort of backfill this marketing requirements document to make sure that we keep tabs of these sometimes elusive user needs as part of the design specification. So in this case here, we're saying, okay, we have an issue with the functionality of the device from the ability to change the type of energy output from this particular console. Again, this is all made up stuff, so if any of you guys are into RF devices, don't challenge me on this, I'm just making examples. So wouldn't it be really cool if our handpieces could be a universal handpiece? It could manage different types of energy outputs and so forth. So you use the same device, maybe you change the wand out, it's a single-use wand, but the handpiece itself can do multiple things. And then secondarily, what if the device itself had many outputs as well? So you say, okay, I need monopolar, here it is monopolar. I need bipolar, here's bipolar. I need plasma, here's plasma, right? So if the device itself could do all those things as well, and all you have to do is push a button and change a wand, you can have essentially another device without having to change almost anything out. Wouldn't that be great? We also know that space in the OR is at a premium, so it'd be nice to have one device that does the job of three things, right? That would be a good thing to do. So at the end of this is a concept of making sure that as you're developing the design, you're meeting the needs of the end user, that you had done all this research up front. We all know as product developers that quite often it's a trade-off, right? Sometimes you're down the road with some ideas and they're turning out to be technically challenging, they're turning out to be a little expensive, they turn out to take too much time, whatever it is. How do you make the right decisions in terms of making sure that you are incorporating the must-have features versus the would like to have but don't need to have? Shouldn't there be a systematic process that allows decision-making to be so precise that you can say, I need this, we got to do this. I don't need that. If you can fit it in for $5, that's great. If you can't, forget it. Managing trade-offs, I think, is one of the biggest challenges during the product development cycle. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to throw the dice and say, okay, I end up with what I end up with. And when I get down to my prototypes and I start doing my validations at the end, I realize that I lost half the must-haves that I needed to have, and now I'm not going to have the market share that I wanted. Or because of creeping elegance, my device is now 50% more expensive than I wanted it to be, and now I can only sell it in certain countries. So having this mapping strategy allows us to be a little more conscientious about what are the design features we need to have, and how are we solving them through the design process. So I've added a line at the bottom of this UX map. I'm calling it my UX design trace matrix. Of course, it can look like anything you want. It can look like a normal inputs to outputs trace matrix. But if you can assign a design feature or a technology or whatever it is that is solving that particular need for the device and assign it there, then somebody can take a look at that as you go through the conceptual process and say, yep, that's fantastic. That is absolutely solving the problem that the user needs solved. Or you can look at it and say, what are these engineers dreaming up? This does not solve my problem, right? There's got to be a better way. You guys are only solving half the problem. You don't want to just say, throw it into the engineering department and then hope to hell that they come out with exactly what you need, that you can sell. I'm talking to the marketing people here. They know what I'm talking about. So if you have this process, if you have this mapping strategy, and this is a living document because designs change as you go down through the conceptual process, but if the whole team, if all of the stakeholders can look at the solutions that are being put together to meet those needs, you can be part of that same team that says, yeah, this is great, no, this is not good. What about this? You forgot that, right? So this is what I mean by a mapping strategy that everybody can understand and everybody can be part of the process of making the right decisions. So in summary, I'm turning my pages here too fast because time's running out. In summary, what are we trying to do here? We're mapping the user needs to design feature sets. We're making sure that our use risk assessment is running the entire length of the design process to ensure that the device ends up being safe to use, right? You need that. And I think it's important that everybody should understand the difference between what use safety means and what ease of use means. Use safety is something you must have. It's something the FDA says you have to have. And it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as ease of use. Ease of use is a nice marketing tool to have. It helps you sell the device, but it doesn't necessarily make it easy or safe to use. And sometimes you have to make the right compromise between making sure it's safe to use and making sure it's easy to use at the same time. And sometimes they're loggerheads, and so you have to compromise. Then you have to manage feature value, as I said, versus cost, versus risk, versus time, and so forth, because you need to get your time to market as quickly as you can possibly do it. So once again, use safety is mandatory, ease of use is desirable. This is a user-centered design process. It's very powerful. I invite all of you to understand it better, to use it every day, and understand that unmet user needs, user aspirations. So if you can solve those problems, you are innovating because they're not known, because there's not voice of the customer, chances are it is an innovation that nobody's done before. And if nobody else has done it before, there's a good chance you can get IP on it. And that's where real innovation is, because you can sell that because you know people want that. They told you they want that. And then the trace matrix allows you to make great decisions and make the right trade-offs as you go through the design process. Last slide here. So we've talked about how usability engineering is an important part of the design process. The FDA has finally realized in the last 5 to 10 years how important it really is to avoid use-related problems. So spoken needs are easy, unspoken needs are difficult to understand. Understand, characterize use case challenges, understand the importance of what legacy design means to the end user. We're dealing with clinical devices, we're dealing with highly trained personnel. Just because something can be proven to be better as a design does not mean it's the right thing to do. You've got to understand how quick your user is likely to change to adapt to a new technology or a new way to do things. And understanding the adoption process is an important part of making sure that your device is widely accepted. If you can create the innovation, if you can protect your innovation, obviously that's a great business opportunity as well for you, because you can keep people away from that for years if you do the right thing. So, and last but not least, I want to talk about de-skilling. Some of you have heard about this term de-skilling. When people talk to opinion leaders are usually highly skilled, highly experienced end users. They can do things that others can't do, right? That's not good for a device that is widely accepted. You have to design your device for the least skilled person that's going to use your device. So if you can de-skill it so that everybody who's likely to use it can do a great job, then your device is going to be that much better, isn't it? So de-skilling is a great result to have in any device out there.
That was a solid presentation. What is your booth number?
515.
How many of you got something out of Philip's presentation? And I imagine everyone with their hand raised wants a copy of the deck. So can they give you their cards at 515?
Yeah, please come by. I'd love to talk to you guys more about this process. I'd love to show you our little case study, talk to you about what we did and how we did it and why we do certain things. I've been doing this for 30 years. I love to share ideas with some of you guys who are design developers as well. We've got a nice GUI as well to present, and I'd love to show you guys. So
well,
we're
you
over
explained
at
it.
5:15.
You explained it very well, and no better testament than the audience size while you spoke grew 20-fold. That's impressive.
Well, thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Philip. Let's hear it for Philip.